Hi, Andreas from Toddle here. And today one of our users asked me, how can I make a bar chart in Toddle? And I thought that's actually a really interesting idea for video. So let's get into it. I've got a project loaded up here, and I'm going to go and create a new component. I'm going to call it bar chart. And so I want this bar chart component to be reusable with different data sets. So I'm going to make it take the actual data set in as an attribute. I'm going to go here, create a new attribute, call it data set. And then in the test value, I want to sort of use a dummy data set. And I've got one loaded up that I've got from an API here. So I'm just going to copy that JSON right in here and then paste it right into our data set, right? So now that I've got it ready, I'm going to start actually building my chart component. So first, I'm going to go and add a div that's going to wrap my whole chart, all the bars in the chart, right? I'm going to just by default setting that to 200 pixels, and we can change that later if we want to. Then I'm going to make sure that the layout direction is horizontal, and I'm going to align everything to the bottom, right? So all the bars are aligned to the bottom. Let's also add a little gap of 4 pixels. Now, the next thing I want to do is add a div in here. And this div is going to represent a bar. So I am going to, for now, I think I'm going to set the height to 100%. And then I'm going to tell it to flex because I want all the bars to sort of take up the full width, but I want them sort of like the width should be dependent on how many bars there are. So if we only have 2, there'll be half each. In this case, if we only have 1, it's going to take up the whole space, right? Let's go and add a background color to that. We are going to go with pink. So now we've got 1 bar, and it's currently sized at 100%. So I think the next step is actually go and repeat this bar like this based on our data. So it actually, we get the number of bars from our data set, right? So I'm just going to go repeat, and go and select the data set, and it's automatically going to render these bars one at a time based on how many items in our data set, right? Then I'll add a span here as a label. And I think by default, we can just sort of censor that and align it to the bottom to get it down here. And then on the actual span, we can add a little bit of offset here. So on the top, we'll add, I think, 24 pixels. So that the labels are below the bars, right? This is just an easy way of sort of getting them all aligned to the correct bar, right? We want them anchored to the right bar, but actually offset a bit below. I'm going to change the text color to something a bit brighter. And then, of course, the actual text inside, we're going to go and pick our repeat item. And in the JSON I copied, every item in the array is an object with a label and a value. And that actually matches really, that's a good data model for a bar chart because we don't know what the value represents. That can be different. And we don't really know what the label represents either. It could be a month, it could be a user, it could be a district, it could, whatever it is you're doing a bar chart over, right? So we'll just be agnostic here and just say it's a label and a value. So I'm just going to pick the label. For this data set, it's weekdays. Of course, whatever that label sort of says, it could be something different, right? So now we're kind of getting, I'm just going to add quick a margin bottom on this one. And the reason why I'm doing that is because, let's put it at 34. The reason why I'm doing that is because then when we insert it, this actual bar chart actually takes up the whole space. And we don't have these labels down here not overflowing the bar chart. So they've got to be rendered on top of something if you put something below the chart when you put it on a page, right? So the only step now for this example is that we obviously need the bars to be rendered at the right height relative to the value they represent, right? And the plan here is to find the biggest value and then say that should be 100% high. Like that should take out 100% of our bar chart. And then every other value should basically be whatever their value is as a percentage of the whole. So if this one turns out actually to be 100, right, and this one's 80, then this should be 80% height. If this one's like the value is 15, then it should be 15% high, right? Obviously, the numbers probably never add up beautiful. So the biggest one is 100, right? But so the first step is to go and find out what is the biggest value in our data set. And I'm going to use a component formula here. I'm going to call it max value. And then what I'm going to do, we're just going to go full screen. I'm going to find my data set, and then I'm going to sort it like this, sort. And I'm going to sort by the value inside the item here. And then when we look at the output, we can see here, we're getting Monday, the value here is 10, and at the end we get 34. So I'm just going to change ascending here to false. And that way our first item is going to be the largest one, which is on our Thursday, 34, right? Then I'm just going to get the first element. And from here, I'm going to say get, which is getting an object, like an item, a property out of an object by its label. I'm going to get value, right? So sort the database, sort the data set based on the biggest values first, grab out the first one, and then get its value. And that's going to be our largest value, right? So now that I know what the largest value in the data set is, what I need to do is for each of these items, I need to go and calculate what is the height of that, what should the height of that item be? So what is its value as a percent of the largest value, right? So I'm going to go and grab my div here. And we don't really have a way today in toddle to sort of say, hey, this height should be set using a formula. That is something we will ship, but today there's no way of doing that directly here. But what we can do is we can use a style attribute. So this is built into HTML. And if you set a style attribute, you can put little CSS styles in there, and it's going to override everything else. So I really recommend not using the style attribute in toddle unless you have a scenario where that's the only solution, because it does make it a little bit harder to understand why, for example, in this case, one bar might be 30% when that doesn't show up in the style panel. So it's definitely a tool you should use sparingly, but in this case, it's kind of the perfect fit, right? So what we need here is we need something along the lines of, we're going to use a concatenate, and we're going to say height, colon. And so this is the CSS notation for styling, right? We say height, colon. And then after that, we want something along the line of like 80%, right? But that 80 number, we sort of have to calculate that. So we're going to go and add a subformula here. We're going to grab the item's value. Then we divide it by the max value, which is down here. Let's go full screen again. And then we get this 0.29. So it's about 30%, 29%, right? We're going to multiply by 100 to get the actual percentage number. And then we're just going to round it off like that, right? We don't care that we're throwing away some decimals because, quite frankly, you're not going to be able to tell whether something is 29 or 29.5% high, right? And then after that, we need to add it in percent, right? So this sort of let us define the style attribute, saying, hey, you should set the height to be, in this case, 29%, but for every bar, that's going to be slightly different, right? So now that we close that, we can see that each bar has now aligned itself to be the actual height of that bar, right? So we could add a lot more here. We probably want to add like a tooltip or something on top that shows you what the actual value is. But for now, let's just call it a day with the bar chart. Let me just go to the homepage here. And I actually got we're going to add an API here called, let's just call it data. And I think here we are going to do this and grab out a slightly different data set here and copy that value in. So let's use an example here. We get the data out of a data set, and then we're going to add our bar chart here. And for its data set, we're going to go grab our data, which I ended up calling it, and then data here. And you can see here we have our nice bar chart, and we can then use wherever we need to have a display bar chart. Thank you very much for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, and I hope you liked the video.